All right, we're on. Good evening. Welcome to the Sherborn Board of Selectmen meeting of April 17th. We're a little bit late. Sorry for the delay, and Paul's coming shortly. But in the meantime, we'll get going. We'll start with David. If you could read the agenda here, the draft agenda, please.
Yep. Tonight we'll start with vote to approve or amend the agenda, and I'm not aware of any amendments. And that's then public comment period, and then we'll go to Doug Ambos, cable TV license renewal, and an update on the negotiations. And then we'll look at the veteran tax work-off program that's proposed for the annual town meeting. And then look at upcoming topics and selectmen reports and town administrator reports, an annual town meeting discussion and preparation if there's any, and then a consideration of selectmen minutes and approval of the warrant to set the next meeting, and then go to executive session with town council regarding police lieutenant contract.
Great. Any amendments, Mike? Motion?
Motion to approve.
Second, all in favor? Great, here we go.
How quick we get stuff done.
I know, without Paul, it's a lot easier. Public comment, anybody for public comment? Nancy Hess, as tax collector? Yes, very good.
I thought you might appreciate a progress report. I came from Boston testifying at the State House for the amendment to the statute to change the name of the tax collector to town collector. Today they had the revenue joint session of the Revenue Committee, and I spoke, and so did the lobbyist for the MCTA, and they voted to recommend favorable action on that. So the House has accepted, the committee has accepted. Don't know how long, don't know where it's going, but it's looking like it's a pretty positive thing.
Would you change the strategy for what's going on with town meeting here on that article? Too early to tell?
You know, I don't think there's any way to predict.
Yeah.
And I think just by the reaction at the hearing, we should just stay the course.
Stay the course, okay.
I mean, it's going to be too bad if 2 days after town meeting this goes through and we have to wait another year to implement any of it. But we'll just have to wait and see. I don't know when the next...
But one could say that there's certainly much greater comfort that this is going to happen to allow us to do what we want to do without
I believe it is going to
putting
happen.
ourselves into a corner here.
Yep.
Pinning ourselves.
As I told you before, Representative Linsky has approached this from several different directions. One is an amendment to the budget, which the House accepted, and then the other was to file an actual bill, and the hearing today was on the bill, and he told the committee that the House had accepted it and that he was doing this from two
But
directions.
he was instrumental in moving this through the House and all that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great.
Yep.
Well, that's a good update.
And then since I'm sitting here and wearing the tax collector's hat, I will once again remind people, May 1st is just around the corner. If they're going away for vacation, they should do it before and not after, because they can't count on the internet working if they want to pay online or any of those things, and it's very expensive if it's a day late. So I would encourage, people have been very good. We have a terrific collection rate already, but I really hate people to get caught in that
Great.
day late thing. And this year it's due on a Thursday, and we're not there on Friday, so they should come in and
Yep, that's
Take
the
care.
Thursday after next school
after
vacation
vacation.
week.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
And
Okay.
Nancy, thanks for going into the State House. I mean, you did that in your capacity as a treasurer to do something that's going to help the
Tax
town
collector.
out.
As
A
tax
collector,
collector,
sorry. And to do something to help the town out, and that was a very
I'm hoping.
great thing to do.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks, and I see it's date night, that's great. Yeah, there you go. Okay, anybody else for public comment? Yes, sir.
Hi, Bill Miller, 102 Bullitt Street. I'm here with the Cable TV Advisory Committee. And I thought I'd mention that the potholes on Bullard Street have been really bad. I didn't check on the way over, maybe they were done today, but they've been really bad for at least a month now. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know what's going on in town.
Isn't Bullard Street where the CM&D garage is located?
That's Butler. I think they're Butler.
Okay. Thanks, I was going to say that one. Okay, but thanks for pointing that out. That's helpful when we find out and do something about it.
Paul lives right on the corner, but.
Yes, that, oh, gotcha. Yeah, I gotcha, yeah, gotcha.
Well, we did get some funding, right?
That's right, we got 38,000 extra from the state for potholes and other roadway beautification, so the money will be spent
I
completely.
think just potholes. I don't know about roadway beautification.
Yeah, well,
Well, yes, you can. It's a pretty big picture.
rails and lines and,
Yeah.
and the
I'd love-
potholes
I'd
are
love-
still gonna
I'd love
be
to see us
done.
beautify the potholes first.
Yeah,
No, they're getting.
those are happening anyway.
Right.
Elliot, yes?
Sound's not working? The sound's not working.
The
Sound's not
sound
working?
is not working?
Yeah, my wife said they can't hear.
They can't hear us on the TV?
It's muffled, apparently.
Ah, glad we're here to talk about our cable
I
arrangement,
don't mean to bring that up.
because that was one of the points I was going to raise anyway. Yes, Elliot, yes, sir.
Call me Tony, I'm a little hoarse. Uh,
I've heard that before, and I've used it
Yeah.
since, yeah.
Well, I've complained about the bark mulch touching the living trees here, and I gave you a newspaper
Yep.
article saying it's not a good thing to do. In fact, it's a bad thing to do. The bark mulch is still out here, and I'll say it again, will you please get rid of the damn stuff? Also, when we first moved into this renovated town hall, I complained about the noise from the ventilator. And we have to shut it off during meetings because it makes too much noise. Now, what have we been here, about 10 years now? And nothing has been done. So, come on, guys. Is this a public meeting room or not? And, so those are two items.
Worth reminding, thank you for that.
And also, until these items are corrected, I'll be voting no on just about everything at town meeting, because I don't know what else to do. Also, the zoning board of appeals has again issued the
Permit for the
permit
Sherborn
for the-
Business
the beer
Association
bash
Brew Fest.
Under my bedroom window.
What night
Yeah.
is that?
Over my objections, and I think it's illegal. I don't care what town council says. If it wasn't for that bylaw, there probably wouldn't be a Sherborn Inn. We were assured there'd be no outdoor entertainment at the Sherborn Inn or any other restaurant. So for these reasons, I'll be voting no on just about everything. I will be voting in favor of a fire truck and a dump truck.
All right,
But beyond that,
thank you,
don't plan on me for a yes vote.
thank you. Anybody else? All right, that moves us along then. Our cable TV part of the agenda, the guy is over there, Doug Ambos is over there trying to fix the sound as we speak.
Well, we've got a little time. I mean, I would think that David might want to look into that ventilator question. It is quite annoying in
We had it
in these
looked at.
meeting rooms.
It's a couple of $1,000 to get it fixed.
So that's either a lot or it's not very much. I mean, considering how many meetings we have in this room, I know we have a tight budget, but maybe we
Right.
can figure out a way to do that.
We'll have it, we're going to have it spec'd out with an actual quote as opposed to
Can you do it
just an
before town
estimate.
meeting so Elliot can vote yes on some things, or?
Next town meeting.
Oh, okay, all right.
He's still got other issues that
I'll
won't be
probably
resolved.
dead by then, so-
And the
Hope
mulch
not,
thing,
Elliot.
I've heard the mulch every time, not just from Elliot, from a number of folks. the
I have to
Sherborn
rely,
Garden Club, so.
I pass it on.
I understand.
I tell the CM&D director, I tell the tree warden.
I'd move that we don't have mulch touching the tree trunks.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Okay.
Will you let me come out here with a rake and rake the damn stuff away from the...
No, we got
Welcome.
guys to do that, but,
Well, get with it, do it. I'll believe it when I see
Well, it's
it.
now
all right,
town
we've-
policy to
It's
do
town
that.
policy, that's right. We've
You
established the
just
policy.
established it for us.
Yeah, I'll have to join the union to
That's
do
right.
any work on the...
Yeah, and
I guess.
workman's comp and all those issues, we don't need that, Elliot.
We can.
Well, Doug, if you're good, we're good at this stage. So you,
Want to move forward?
if you want, or if you want us to take a few other things up, because I know you're waiting for Bill Solomon.
He should
Your
be here
call.
another 5 minutes or so.
The traffic was terrible tonight, so if he's coming from, I think he lives North Shore or something,
Right, he said the
Yeah.
pike was all backed up. He was just getting off the Speen Street exit.
it's still terrible. He's still in traffic.
So if you want to take something else,
Yeah, we'll just do some things. How about this?
Yeah. But we should skip the tax work off until Paul gets here, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we have upcoming meeting topics. We can talk about those, and David, you can fill Paul in later, but briefly, on May 8th, we have a public hearing on this license that we're going to discuss in a little bit, on the renewal of the Comcast license.
I think that date might have been changed.
We moved it to the 15th because Michael can't be here.
Oh, okay,
Oh, okay.
okay.
I think we changed it.
Let's
to the-
change that. All right. Comcast public. Yeah. We have a stormwater GIS update discussion as part of the agenda, which will be very interesting.
We had that on a previous agenda that got bumped.
Bumped. Yeah, we keep bumping some things on the 15th. On the 22nd, if we do that next week as a meeting, we have the discussion of townwide fees. Sounds like because of the nature, and then we bump things.
That's
And
the
this is
number.
one of those things we
It's
bumped.
piled up on that one night.
It's
Yeah.
going into that date. So we have townwide fees, hiring, appointment policy, leave notices, senior tax program. And so would it be safe to say some of that is also general personnel administration plan policy discussion as well? Some
Yeah, I
sort of
mean, that
thing?
falls under
Some of
that
those are
hiring.
those issues. Yeah.
An
I'm
appointment.
going to make a request, and don't take this the wrong way, but these are items for May 22nd. Can we agree that maybe by May 10th or 8th or something, we actually have those materials, so we have time to prepare for the meetings? And one of the problems is getting everything
Yes.
a day or two before the meeting. And these are important topics, and we're now planning them a month in advance, so, which is good. It's really good.
Right,
I'm with you on that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so we just ticked off one section of our thing here. What else did we put off?
I also wanted to give you a heads up that appointments are coming up. So
Yes. But, and
Board of
those are by
Selectmen
June
appointments.
15th, right?
Right.
Is ideally, but those are June 15th or July 15th dates is when they're?
Right.
June 15th.
June
All
15th.
rise.
June 15th, yeah.
Okay,
So we'll add that onto the agenda.
yes. Yeah, so that would be good to have your recommendation, and you may be subject to new town meeting policies, bylaws, when we have that discussion. Right?
Yes.
Good evening, Paul. We did
Hey, Paul.
start without you. We just did public comment. We're just going over some upcoming meeting topics. We're waiting for a gentleman to come with Doug, or Bill Solomon. So we thought we'd cover a little bit more ground here.
The two of those items require legislative
So
approval.
maybe they do, yeah.
One is local bylaw, and it has to go to the Attorney General's office, so it could be up to 90 days.
Oh, so it may not be applicable at that point in time, okay. Great. We could do Selectmen reports, since we'll just keep going in order here. So we have a request, right, from the Historical Commission to basically gift to them, I don't know, these are copies of the documents that go back. Well, they're citations from the state, going back to what date here, Diane? 2002
I was there.
and 2002. So we have these two official documents sitting somewhere that the Historical Commission has asked us to gift to them so they can take ownership of them as well as custody and care. And so the reason we have this on the agenda is rather than just sign off on it, I thought we'd bring it to you guys before I sign it to get your approval to sign it, and also if there are any issues or discussion items on this.
No, I think I got two
I
copies.
don't remember what we did
There's
with
two
the
separate
originals.
things.
There was a citation from the House and the Senate upon completion of the town hall renovations.
That's right.
And
think I got two
we
identical
had a little
packages.
ceremony, and both of them,
Oh,
Oh, that's okay. Do we need another one?
yeah, so one is from the House and one is from the Senate,
If
both
anybody else
related
wants to
to the
look at these, I got
renovations
an
on the
extra.
town hall.
yes.
That's right.
So they
So-
presented it, there were speeches.
Yeah.
We were
So-
all delighted that the building was done.
So somebody made copies of these, so they must exist somewhere.
Historical commission was there, because I don't know.
Okay, so they're
They're
asking
thanking us for the donation, so I think we already gave it to them and.
They have thanked it, so unless there are any objections, I would
That's a good place to keep them.
sign this, right? And I just sign it right here.
There are copies at the State House, too.
Move to authorize the donation to the Historic Commission.
Okay, I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor? Great. And I will sign it right here, I guess, right?
Thank you for this work.
Do I need to sign 2 copies? Yes.
Thank you both. Hi, Sean.
All right, and next item we had on there, review of representation letter to Melanson and Heath. And I guess I got confused, but I'll just tell you my thoughts. I'd asked these guys to chase down but just tonight, asked them to chase down the engagement letter we had with Melanson and Heath, our auditors, which would have, we had asked them to help define who the town was and who the right people were, because this is, right now, they've drafted it, this is just a draft, but they ask for a signature, as they say, name of chief executive officer and title, and chief financial officer and title, which, from my understanding, we expected that the town administrator, and our past practice has been the town administrator has signed this on behalf of the town and the town accountant. So I would recommend we vote David authorization to sign this in absence of any other clarity from the engagement letter. All right, so I'll make that motion. But
Yeah, explain a little bit about
All right,
what
so-
we're doing with this. I mean,
So then, what this is the auditors are auditing our financial statements. There are financial statements, i.e. they're the town's financial statements. We're responsible for everything that's in them. And this representation letter goes to them, and it says, geez, these are our financial statements. We're happy with everything we've done. We've done all our responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. We've adequately disclosed the accounting and the items that you need to disclose in terms of materiality and whatnot. And so if I were being asked to sign this, I would hesitate to sign it until I'd seen another draft. So I wanted to make that point. Until I'd seen a draft which reflected what we had last discussed on the draft we saw, to incorporate very good disclosure on our relationship with the region. And also, I would want to see an analysis of the error of capitalizing items of a 5-year life when our bylaw policy and our books that we keep only capitalize items with a 10-year, or I guess it's 5-year, $10,000 life versus 2-year, $5,000 life that's in the underlying detail.
Right.
And I'm told it's material, not material, but it's a simple analysis. She just takes the thing we get from the consultant that prepares the thing the wrong way, is in my view, and wipes out everything below $10,000.
It's just a fixed asset list.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then we can see whether there's any materiality. So I wouldn't sign that absent that, because there's a number of places where capital items are referenced in this letter. Then I would wonder, we talk about, it would be nice to see the legal letter that the lawyers have provided to them, where the lawyers say, geez, there's nothing to worry about, in simple layman's terms. We should see that, because we also, and I would recommend you look at that as a signatory, because you're stating that you're happy with what they state.
Well, and they would have to disclose any material
right.
claims
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
unasserted.
Exactly, because you deal with
So-
these things, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and so then I would ask, I would have a conversation with the auditors briefly about the Canon thing, because that surfaced, I think, in fiscal 13. The dollars are starting to add up in terms of our cost to the town. It's not reflected as a 13 event, it's happening in fiscal 14. That probably makes sense, because the decisions and discussions are happening in this time period, but the event was created prior to this. So that's just worth a conversation. Then it talks about adjusting journal entries that they provided, and I'd be curious what those were. You know what I'm saying?
List of, yeah.
Yeah, just because that gives us a good sense as
That's on
this
one
board to know,
document.
were there any big things that we missed that they said, you got to record this in the books, okay? And then the last thing that I would think long and hard about is where this item 5 says, we are comfortable, basically, we believe that the actuarial assumptions and methods used for pensions and OPEB valuations are sound and make sense. And I think about that a little bit.
You know, Peter, in terms of, those are all good points. I guess I wonder, in terms of what this is used for, if this is used with respect to comparing us to other municipalities for purposes of our bond rating and so forth.
The audit is, yes.
The audit is, I would want to consider whether we want to do anything that would be out of the ordinary for what other municipalities do. I understand we want an accurate reflection of what we believe our true financial condition to be, but if there are practices that other municipalities are not following that would make us look worse than those other municipalities, I would suggest that we not, change how our auditors are asked to do our financial statements with that in mind.
Yes. No, I agree with you. I don't,
Okay.
and I'm not suggesting that. This is where we say, we did this. We're representing to them.
Understood, but,
certain items.
and I think it is good for David to get comfort with all these things and to look into them, but I just would want to make sure that
Well,
his discretion is used in a way that,
doesn't hurt the town.
that doesn't hurt the town. In that-
I'm with
in
you on
that context.
Right. I think that's,
From a legal point of view and a management point of view, the key part of this letter is the fourth paragraph that says, "To the best of our knowledge and belief,
right.
having made such inquiries as we consider necessary for the purpose of appropriately informing ourselves as of April 4, 2014. And then comes this long series of things, which normally, as a lawyer, I would say, don't ever sign something like that.
Right, right.
But that's why we have this language in here, because way back when, we didn't have any knowledge. I mean, there are statements in here like, we confirm that there are no violations or possible violations of law or regulations, and so on and so on. Well, how would we know, and how would our town administrator know that? So we have language in there that's to the best of our knowledge and information and belief, but the key part is to protect ourselves in the town, that you need to have made inquiries of people such as town council and some of the department heads to make sure that we have a record, that in fact we proceeded diligently. Because in the end, what this does is kind of indemnifies the
That's correct.
accountant. So if something is wrong, the first line of defense is the accountant should have picked it up, but the accountant's going to turn around and say, yes, but you signed this letter that said that you're responsible for everything. And our line of defense is that we didn't know, and we proceeded diligently. So I would ask that before this gets signed, you do take such steps as you consider necessary in your professional judgment to make sure that there isn't something out there that's going to blow up. And document it with some emails or some memos to protect yourself, the town, the taxpayers.
Yeah, and I think we've identified in our review when we looked at the draft, those key items that we talked about earlier about the region and the other item. So I think we're all on the same page here on this one. Yeah, and I'm happy to sit in with you, David, if you meet with Frank from the audit firm or however you.
Yeah, that would be
want to do
good.
that, yeah. All right.
So do we have a motion?
So I think I moved. And I think a
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Great. All right, and that's perfect timing, I bet.
Hi, Bill, how are you?
We can give him a minute to catch his breath. if he-
I have to sit in this seat so I can run this projector.
Perfect.
I was expecting Pike traffic, but not Sherborn traffic.
Yeah.
You get that too.
Today was particularly bad.
Yeah, the Pike was a mess.
It was, yeah. Thank you
I was late myself getting here.
So was I.
Well, welcome. So,
very much.
nice to see you, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll do most of the talking at first.
Yes.
So thank you. Doug Ambos, 31 Everett Street, Sherborn. I'm the chair of the Cable TV Advisory Committee, and I'm also joined today by Tom Oberst, another member of the committee, and Bill Miller. And we have a fourth member, Art Crandall, who's not here today. And we have openings, I believe, in our charter for more people. But I will say the advisory committee, Cable TV Advisory Committee, is mostly latent most of the time until we come around to negotiating a license like we have now. Also joined with Bill Solomon, a good friend over the years who helped us out in the last Comcast renewal and the Verizon license that was granted. And so I'm just going to walk through a few things. Bill will handle a lot of the questions about procedure and how we stand in our negotiations. And you also have this in a pre-read email that I sent earlier today. So for those of you, Paul knows this well, having served in municipalities for years, but the reason for a license in general is stated up here, and there's a great site that mass.gov maintains with their cable TV division. But basically, you, the selectmen, grant a license to, as the issuing authority, to a cable TV provider by law, and it's meant to be negotiated on a town-by-town basis so that they can customize according to their needs. And so just some history. We have two providers, and the competition has been great for a town. People thank us for getting a second cable TV provider in here. The Comcast last 10 years, it's amazing that it's been 10 years. And that was granted in May 2005, so it's due again this May in 2014. And Verizon license was granted in November 2007. Actually, that 2004 must be 2005 must be 2004, because it is 10 years. Yes. And again, competition's been very good. And who are the people involved? It's you, the selectmen, you issue the license, the advisory committee. We make recommendations to you. We do the legwork on the ascertainment, what's best for the town, and negotiating the license with our special attorney, Bill Solomon, who's a subject matter expert in this area. Now, we also have the Dover-Sherborn Cable Access Corporation, also DSCTV, and they provide the PEG access service, the public educational government service to the town, or towns, since we're jointly run with Dover. And we use funds from the cable company that are specified in this license. And then we subscribers, all of us townspeople who get cable TV, we pay a small surcharge on our bill to pay for this PEG access. And we subscribers also get this programming of local interest on 3 channels on our cable TV. Again, government, public, and education. And those may be found on these channels. People are watching already know this. The education channel, by the way, on 99, that change happened after we started doing our 3 channels. It used to be Comcast 8, 10, and 22, and a home shopping network station insisted to have a low number, and they had to move us to 99. It was kind of frustrating at the time, but hopefully people know where to find it now. I don't know if you watch cable TV, tune in, but there's a huge variety of stuff. It's pretty vibrant. There's a lot going on. I'm not going to walk through these, but there's some examples. One of the things that's happened over the years is that when cable TV first started going into towns, a lot of people said, "Oh, I want to have my own show." And that's still there to a lesser extent. People have moved to putting their stuff on YouTube. But one thing that will never go away is covering local events. The parades, the concerts, Eagle Scout ceremonies, Veterans Day ceremony that we have here. And similarly, we have that in the school system as well. Government channel covers these meetings, town meetings, advisory hearings, including the marathon all-day Saturday that Pat is good enough to cover, planning board and town caucus, which is always fun.
I hear our ratings are up. I don't know why.
Okay. Up to 3 or 4 per night?
Yeah.
Okay. And education is also really vibrant, with a lot of students taking lessons in the studio and using their own imagination of what they put on. Sports coverage, something that Tom Oberst is helping us out with, has taken a big improvement over the last few years. We're covering more and more things. We now have an instant replay, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
For the sports, and also having all the sports on that one artificial Norris Earl turf field has been great. So, and lots of events. So, I didn't mean to go to questions here because I have more. Okay. For all 3 channels, we provide a bulletin board listing events, and we have a website, and we try to have all our programming available for streaming online, a mix of on YouTube and on our own server. Now we get to the meat of why we're here today. So we have a proposed license with Comcast, and these are the key points. Bill, do you want to walk us through these and add your own?
You can do it if you like, and I can
Okay.
just fill in it.
Okay. One is the PEG operating funds, the funds that pay for our staff and ongoing maintenance, is taken 5% on a calculation of the cable TV revenues. So our subscribers who have a triple play, the phone, internet, and TV, it's just on the TV portion. And there's definitions of that specified in the license. And then they also know that we have to buy equipment and replace it. It wears out. We've replaced basically the contents of that closet at least once in the last 10 years. Our next step is to replace these robotic cameras. We provided things like these screens and projector, and our Dover studio and also our Dover components. We've been replacing equipment periodically and improving it to match the technology improvements. Proposed for this is a $50K, couple payments, and then a 0.25%, what they call PEG capital percentage of funding. Rather than a lump sum, it's going to be tied to their revenue, because as we have 2 providers, the split of number of subscribers changes over the years, and they're interested in protecting themselves. We're fine with that as the totals will meet our requirements.
So these are your proposals or their proposals, or?
It's a combination. These numbers came from Comcast in their draft license that's in this red book. And
That's right, after we had met and.
yes.
So do the subscribers are paying a 5% fee on top of their bill, or how does that work?
I can address that. I can address that. The fee, in a sense, is for use of the right-of-way. So the fee is, town can place a fee on a cable company, what's called a franchise fee. And under federal law, that could be used for anything. It could be used for your police, for your fire, for your budgets. But under state law, it can only be used for PEG access or cable-related purposes. So that it's a charge to the cable company, and from a legal perspective, it's important to distinguish between fees and taxes. It's a charge to the cable company in concept for use of the right-of-way, just like they have to pay if they rent a building for customer service office or for equipment, or if they pay their attorneys, or if they pay WB Mason. So from a financial and a legal perspective, it's a fee, it's a charge, it's a cost.
I understood Peter to be asking whether it comes ultimately out of the subscribers'
Right,
bill.
that's what I want to address,
Okay.
because it's not, so to understand it, the concept. So that any business that has a cost, that they have to pay that cost. You could be, have a dry cleaners and you're paying a cost. Now, whether you charge that to your customers is up to the business. In cable, the federal law allows the cable company to place on the bill a line that says, hey, we're charging this much because we have to pay the franchising authority this much. So it's describing what that is. The law, if they wanted to on their own bill, they could say, and we're charging this because we're paying our accountants or because we're paying our landlords. So in a sense, all money that's paid by a company comes from their business, from their customers. So that the law's been clear that it's not a tax.
And it's not a pass-through from the
It's
subscribers.
not a pass-through, in the sense that, the cable company would argue that, but it's not, and the law's clear on this. It's a fee, it's a charge, it's a rent, in a sense. And they have the right to put that on the bill, and they will argue that they're, quote, they use the term passing it through. And they can use that term, but it's that we're not requiring them to charge it. If they, for renting your right-of-way, which you buy or take, you police, you insure, you clean, all those costs, if they're paying you for that, and they choose to charge their customers, that's up to them. Now, in modern day, they will. They'll show that on the bill, and they'll say 5%. About 7 years ago, and before that, they typically would charge a town that received nothing the same amount. So to give a quick example, because I think this is important, that folks know that this board, as Doug has said, has done the one thing that's crucial to try to have some limits on rates, and that is to bring in a competitor. Because if this board were to say, well, boy, we don't want to get anything from the cable company, we just hope that they lower their rates to their customers, that's not going to happen. And to give you an example of that, as it used to be, because I think it's important that people understand that. I worked with the town of Amherst and the town of Deerfield and Sunderland. In Amherst, the company at one point would charge, let's simplify numbers, $50 for basic and expanded basic cable. And the biller might say, to simplify it, $2.50, $47.50 for the service, basic and expanded, and $2.50 for franchise fee. Now, if you lived in Amherst and you looked at that bill, you would say, look, the town, as a result of this franchise fee, I'm paying $2.50. Now, what do you think the cable company charged in Deerfield and Sunderland, where they had zero franchise fee? What do you think the rate was to their customers there? $50. So that you can't tell from a bill, just because someone puts it on the bill, whether or not, as a matter of economics over a 10-year period, that that's why you're paying that. Because a cable company at any time, and we don't even have rate regulation here, I think we have effective competition, so there's no rate regulation. They at any time can raise their rates. So at the end of the day, if the town were to say to a company, well, look, we'll charge you no franchise fee, will you guarantee us a rate differential? They would say they couldn't do that. Or to look at it another way, I'll do two quick examples. Let's say there was no public way, and the cable company had to get a right-of-way from folks who had property. And they came to you and they said, I'll say, Mike, we're the cable company, we'd like to use your property to put up conduits in the ground and poles and cables, is that okay? And you might say, well, all right, but you need to pay me. Well, Mike, if you pay me, I'm just going to have to charge all your neighbors and the people in the town. Do you want me to do that? You would probably say, well, that's up to you what you charge. I want to be compensated if you're going to use my property. So I say to folks, now you're selectmen, and now you're in charge of public property, and you have that fiduciary duty. Is your fiduciary duty to protect the value of that public property anything less than if they went to you at your home and asked you? And I think the answer is no. And then finally, I say, if we were around the table and we had, again, lawyers, W.B. Mason, everybody else in the town, and they went around to everyone and they said, look, we're still going to use you, but we were wondering, would you lower what you charge us, the cable company, so that maybe one day we can lower our rates? We can't promise anything. Nobody would say yes. They got to the town. Would the town be the only party that said that? So for those who think government should be run like a business, which it can't always be, but if you think government should be run like a business, which at times it should be, then that's what you're doing. You're saying you have a valuable right-of-way, and that there should be compensation for that. And if, to the extent the cable company wants to charge their customers, they're not your customers, they're your taxpayers in part, but they're their customers. If they want to put on the bill to say, we're collecting this from you because we're being charged by the town, that's their right. So the legal answer, clearly, and I believe the financial answer, is that you're charging them for that cost, and they're deciding if they want to charge their customers. And particularly in the next 10 years, when we don't know the nature of video competition over the internet and how that interplays with cable, we don't know what financial pressures they'll have to contain their rates, not to contain their rates. We can't predict that. So that at the end of the day, it's what a town should do is figure out what are its, as the Cable Act says, what are your cable-related needs and interests, try to get that compensation, because there's no upside. It would be a fool's game to try to figure out of taking less in the hope that a cable company would decide that that should be returned to their customers and not kept by them.
Could I just add to that we currently are at this rate, and the fact that they're willing to carry that forward is remarkable. They have been giving a hard time to many communities. It's hard to get this this rate, so I commend both of you for securing this package. This tells me that we're a lot closer, and it's going to be easier to redo this license and renew this license than it was when you and I and
Yes, yeah, quite a battle.
Doug were working
That's
on
right.
it 10 years ago.
Exactly.
This is going to be a much easier,
So we're getting, Paul, so we get 50K, and that's an annual, not?
The,
It's a-
one time.
It's a one-time.
50 will be a one-time.
Okay.
And the 0.25%, which is also capital, would be paid every quarter, so that the 5% is paid quarterly, 4 times a year, all throughout the 10 years.
Oh, so we're getting the 5%, and in
That's
addition, you're getting this 0.25%.
And
That's right, exactly.
it's
Okay.
easy
But it's not
then-
coming to the town, it's coming to cable.
Well, it'll come to the town, and then to
It's a
cable.
franchise
You'll
fee.
direct it over to the access folks. And-
Right, I
And
understand.
that's right. So that, now, and then there's a balance here. The 50,000 is a set amount, so that is predictable. And the 0.25, when we've done the calculations, is such that it's the rough equivalent to $25,000. But depending if the revenues are higher or lower, your revenues are significant. Your average revenue for Comcast is $116 a month. Now, that would be average revenue as currently defined, and we expect to be defined in the next license, broad definition of revenue. That includes not only what their subscribers pay, but also what non-subscriber revenue, which is advertising and home shopping. And that issue, I expect to be closed, that currently your license provides that the definition of gross revenue is a broader definition, doesn't deduct anything from that definition. And that's the definition in the Verizon license and the current Comcast license. We need to finalize that, but we expect that, and it should be the definition in the final Comcast license on a renewal. The things to keep in mind is you have a wonderful access program, and the Sherborn's running its part, and together with Dover, they're both small communities, and therefore all the more reason why the 5% funding would be needed. If you're in Boston, you might not need 5%. They have it, but you might not need it because it's a lot more funds that come from that. But in Sherborn, it runs a very tight program, a lot of government program, good public access, and I know the money is well spent, and that's to the credit of the work the town did to set up the corporation and to do it also with some savings by doing it together with Dover.
Tell a little bit about this fiber connection. Where is the Dover studio, and what's that used for?
Yeah, so DSC TV originates the educational and the public portion of our programming from our studio in the Dover High School, Dover Sherborn High School. It's at the corner of the Lindquist Commons building. It's kind of cool to go in there and see the racks of equipment and cameras and so on. So I should first talk about the third point here, which leads to the fourth point. So this iNet, or institutional network, is a set of coax cable connecting a couple buildings in town where we historically had the ability to do live broadcasts from there. And we're proposing, when we see what we value, dropping that requirement and instead asking Comcast to make a direct fiber connection between here and that Dover studio to solve a bunch of problems. And that includes that our staff over in the high school cable studio can't see what the subscribers see here. They don't have a subscriber feed, a drop from the pole to see exactly what the subscribers see here. So now that would be a feedback method so they can monitor the on-air system, basically. And also, it's not a use case we do often, but we could actually record to our hard disks over in the Dover studio from these meetings. And right now, we record here and then schedule our playback from here. And actually put a DVD over to the studio and then put it up on YouTube, which is kind of antiquated.
How much of the fiber capacity would that use? If you were using it for, the kinds of things you just described, does that use up all the fiber capacity, or is there other capacity?
No, and when they run those cables, they'd put multiple strands on there for future use. So
Right, and that's
potentially
what I'm
there could be
wondering,
use
are
for
there
things.
other things that the town could do with the fiber?
In this case, no, only because they're providing that just for purposes of PEG access as sort of just for that and not for other purposes. So it would not be the town's fiber, but it'd be Comcast's responsibility to provide, maintain, repair. But what the license will provide, and we've agreed upon, is that if the town going forward would like to have live video origination from other buildings, including the building next door, then the town can, and you could use cable dollars to do this, could have fiber built between those buildings and the town hall. And you could use that for video origination. Now, if you do that, you would put fiber in. Your point, Mike, is to, you could use that for connecting, if you don't have a municipal fiber connection now between those buildings, that you could connect your town hall with all those other buildings. And so that would allow for both video return and allow for an expansion or initial municipal fiber system for the town. And that would be from funds that you get from this license or already have.
Well, for example, we're going to have a new library next door, and I know a lot of the kids in high school study over at that library from time to time. You know, would there be some value in a separate connection between the school and the library? Is that the kind of thing that Comcast could be asked to accommodate within their cable?
Right.
That kind of
They,
thing?
you know, in the modern world, unfortunately, that they're no longer wanting to build what used to be called the institutional networks, INETs. But if the town has a need for that, as you're saying, for your purposes.
I'm just making that need up.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Going
somewhere I
forward,
want to think about that.
that what you would do is use, and you have to do this consistent with the PEG needs, but you could have that spec, for instance, as a company contract, that at no cost, they would come out and they would do the specifications and cost for building that connection. They built maybe 60, 70 municipal fiber networks in the state. And then you take a look at that and you'd say, all right, well, that's also needed for PEG access video return, so that you could use some of the PEG access dollars to build that municipal fiber system, maybe not the full cost, but a significant
Well,
part
that's
of it.
what I'm getting at. Good. Okay.
Yeah, and you could use that, and then that would be your fiber that would be used for both those purposes. And we specifically, in the negotiation, and we have an agreement, agreed that that any fibers that are brought to the town hall can be interconnected to your hub site here, and those would then be taken back on the Comcast video return, so that those town needs can be met. But in the modern day, it's more common that it's done with funding from the cable company rather than by the cable company. And that works out okay, because it's yours, you can build what you want, you don't have a company store building it for you at their cost, so it works out pretty well. And that's something we can talk about now to look at for moving forward on the town side, and the review would be at no cost to the town.
And then is there any consideration given ever to asking for, either putting specifications in terms of what they have to do if they dig up a road as far as repaving it properly and so forth, at A, and B would be in terms of burying lines or in certain parts of town or through the center of town or something like that? Are those things that some communities ask for?
Yeah, and the license that I would expect to have signed here, which is sort of an equilibrium now with Comcast, I feel is that I've drafted, is very protective of exactly those municipal needs of doing it in a way that requires compliance with bylaws and regulations and other standards that you have. And so I think the best way to do that generally is to have it on the license, address those issues, but not hit it on the micro level, because rather than debate those now, we just need to make sure that we have sufficient language that they have to comply with your standards. And I think the license, my draft, and which we've recently agreed to in a number of communities, it, has that language that's done in a fair way. So exactly right, they would have those obligations going forward under the draft that we recommend.
Will this fiber connection help us improve the image quality and the sound
Absolutely.
quality?
And
Because
it's-
that's a complaint
it's
that people
interesting
have
because-
all over the place. yeah.
Because we proposed this to Comcast, said, hey, this would really solve our problem. They went away and said, you know what, it would solve their problems too, because it's a very circuitous route how it gets out. I forget
Okay.
the exact towns that pass through the Needham, head in from Natick, and then finally over to Foxborough and back up to Dover, and this would make a straight cord.
So it will show my good side. from then
Absolutely.
on. All right, I got that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Big difference in the quality of sound and picture with the fiber. It doesn't have amplifiers and all the problems that exist and get affected by weather. And then if it didn't fix the quality, well, that's their responsibility, and that's something we could call the company on.
How much fiber do they have strung in town already?
I don't know.
Is everybody on fiber? Or,
Yeah.
we
Except,
are.
well, yeah, to the nodes. Yeah, their system goes fiber to a node, and then from node, it's copper. Verizon's system is fiber to the home, so they have a lot of fiber in the town. Now,
But, yeah, part of my question was, up till a year or two ago, and I'm on Comcast, we had kind of significant quality problems, including outages at times when you wouldn't expect outages, as well as always getting outages at times when you could expect outages. That seems to have gotten better, and I was wondering if they had done something different or
my guess is
working on
that,
it.
yeah, they have done work to try to upgrade their system. The only part that still works, but that they'll have to deal with going forward, is the question of, will there be a time where there's a need to go from the node to the home in fiber because of broadband needs? They're not there now, but that's something they'll have to make a decision on going forward.
But you have upgrade language in that license, Bill?
That we don't.
Okay.
What we, the Telecommunication Act limits to some degree what we can tell them on technology. Now, there's always sort of the issue du jour, and there used to be maybe 10 years ago, the issue of having a hearing about changes in technology. And I think where things are now, that on the upside, that they are a good company from a technological standpoint. And as a result of that, that anything you would write and put in a license really would add nothing to the reality of the situation we have, where if there's something that Sherborn doesn't have that other folks do have, that we would call them in and speak with them. And that the language that we could get agreement on really would be nothing other than they'll come in and talk to us. Now, we have one issue that we still need to finalize with Comcast that we'd like to see with respect to the question of PEG access on in digital format. Right now, PEG access is not shown in digital, even if you send them a digital signal. Most of their programming is available in digital, and we would like to see a letter from Comcast that just addresses, hey, we'll come and talk to you about that. And we haven't finalized that yet, but that's what we're aiming for. And so that would be consistent with what you're saying, because of all the issues, the technological issues, that's really at this point the most important, that PEG access not be left behind in a digital world where people have very clear picture. They're used to looking at the channels of the digital channels, and they can't find the access channels. So that we're working on is one of the final issues of the license. And that would be outside of the license in a side letter.
So
Are
moving
they,
to
are they in
HD.
discussions, aren't they merging with Time Warner?
Purchasing.
Being purchased by
Yeah,
Time
or
Warner?
that's right, they are.
That hasn't taken place though, right?
No,
That's-
well, that transfer process is in place now in Time Warner Communities, so they're looking at, typically corporate, complicated matter, but to purchase Time Warner, that would be part of Comcast. Now, that still has to get approval at the FCC and the Department of Justice, and then all the Time Warner communities, it has to be approved. It does not have to be approved in the Comcast communities, except if a town has a very unique license, which I have not heard of, but it does have to be approved in those communities.
So it has no bearing on, really no impact expected
Well,
on
I
us going
don't, that's
forward?
right. Well, if from a micro level, no. On a macro level, the big questions always are media, power of one company from a media perspective, effect on programmers, effect on competition, video-based. So I think on a macro level, that's a decision every person or even town can look at and make. But on a level of affecting our license or no, the only thing I would say, it's always a good time to negotiate with a company when they don't want to look bad. So in that sense, that there's an advantage of negotiating now where they have, but Comcast is a good company, it's a well-run company, they try to treat their towns fairly. The town, Sherborn's very lucky that Frank Foss, the government affairs manager, has been here many years. He knows his stuff. He does an excellent job, And while he's a tough negotiator, he's a fair guy. So in that sense, the relationship is one that's allowed this to progress, and we hope it continues so we can tie down those final issues together with Frank.
Just a couple of questions at this end of the table, if I could.
Absolutely.
Didn't we put an INET requirement in the existing license? And
Yep.
they didn't build it?
Oh, no, they did,
They
but
did.
they have to maintain it every year. And the truth is, we don't use it. And Comcast is doing it with outdated coax cable, regular copper cable, not fiber, between the buildings.
So what happens, we sign the new license, what happens to the existing physical hardware of the INET? Are they going to pull it down and take it with them?
Well, you know, that's a good question. Typically, we can do whatever, we can approach Comcast with whatever, any position the town would like to take on that. Sometimes, although it's a separate system, they're interlashed with the cable system, they would want to keep it up. It's, you know, there's not a lot of fibers there. So the more typically, it's not dealt with, that and it's typically not an issue because it's not such a large structural matter. It's probably within sometimes the same conduits or bundles that the cable system's in. So that we typically don't address that, but it's a fair question. And why don't we ask Frank to tell us what their plans are with it, and if they don't propose to take it down, explain why that's isn't a problem from a physical standpoint and an aesthetic standpoint, so the town is assured of that.
So that maybe if they don't want it, they could sign it over to us.
Well, that's a good point also. Typically there, it's, firstly, it's copper, right? So that you wouldn't want it because.
Except for scrap value.
That's right, that's right, because it's copper, not fiber. But I think it's a fair question. I have, years ago, we've had discussions about that sort of issue. So why don't I ask Comcast to address it and see if the town and the board is satisfied with that response.
What does the INET, where does the INET go now? What's
It
covered?
goes, you could broadcast remotely from Pine Hill or the community center across the street. Those are the two buildings that we could originate programming
How
from.
far is Pine Hill?
It's about 2 miles that way,
Yeah.
And
maybe a little less.
the community center, so that's why I was wondering when Mike Giamo mentioned the library, that's between here and the community center. So
Just over here, yeah.
the existing INET pretty much goes right by it. So if the library, as part of their renovations maybe, wanted to connect, they could, but you're saying the technology with the copper is not good enough?
I don't see what purpose it would serve. You're talking about students being able to access servers back in the high school.
There may be other
Right.
uses, but I don't know what they are.
But this infrastructure is to broadcast TV, basically on dedicated cable.
Right, but that's why
Nowadays-
if you build the municipal, if the cost from building here to the community center and the library would be very small. And to put fiber connected here to the town hall, so that if the town has an interest in doing that, and that could be, then the town could have that built, fiber, at very low cost, and that would be paid for out of cable funds. So that puts you in the best position to have a fiber that you own to use for municipal and educational purposes, as well as PEG access video return. And given those distances, that's not a significant expense.
But to your knowledge, we're not using it?
No, we haven't. For the most part, when we had, for example, we've had town meetings held in the Pine Hill Auditorium when the high school was used. And we've recorded it and done playback later rather than broadcasting live. For the most part, you want people to come and make a quorum. And sometimes the town caucus that we hold in the town hall is the same thing, or excuse me, the old town hall, community center. I'm dating myself.
What's the term? Is that a set term under the statute?
Good
10
question.
years?
The maximum allowed under state law is, for renewal, is 10 years. So my recommendation to the committee has been, and to the town, would be to do it for the 10 years. I think if kind of like a long-term mortgage, when you get a good rate, the time to get a good license is now and not in the future. And if the town can get a good license, and I think if we're going to sign it, it's going to be a good license, then I think it's in the town's interest to get that now and to lock it in for 10 years, because there are uncertainties going forward in the future.
And what's the hook in terms of, I'll call it behavior or quality? Do you have that built into the license too, so that it's revocable or it can be
Yes.
renegotiated if they're not doing what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, and that's the key, is that the license does provide for that process. And interesting enough, and given the strategic differences between the parties, that in some respects, the easiest thing to do is to enforce a license, because that's a legal requirement. And if the company doesn't comply with it, then this board can bring the company here. You can have a hearing for suspension, termination, or for going to court for specific performance or damages. And, that's not a place a cable company wants to be. It doesn't want to have bad publicity. It tries to do the right thing, as Comcast does, so that this list license will be enforceable and have standards that are reasonably enforceable with respect to everything from the quality of PEG programming to how they use your public way. And there'll be also requirements for performance review every year. If you so desire, they'd have to come in and you would do a performance review with them, which is a good idea. At the same time, I know the town, and I've been involved a little bit in the past once in a while, where the town does look at the revenues that come in. You have a very able committee led by Doug, and when the quarterly revenues come in, they look at those revenues and they determine whether or not, based on past revenues and based on standards, that these are accurate, so that the committee does serve the town well by making sure that they keep a check on what's happening during the course of the license.
Do you have a sense of, Doug, of the breakdown between Verizon and Comcast in the town?
Did you bring them?
I don't have the exact numbers, but
Yeah, are you on the internet? Because you can get my email if you
No.
like. Yes, interesting enough, and not surprisingly, because of the nature of the community, Verizon, of course, was gaining a tremendous amount of subscribers. Was it about 1,200 subscribers we had about 10 years ago? At the moment, Verizon has about 120 or so extra additional subscribers. So it might be 626 was Comcast, 640 something compared to the high 700s. So Verizon has 100 and something more subscribers. But as Comcast says, it's now leveled out. So each year, up until this past year or two, the Verizon increase was substantial, and the Comcast decrease was fairly substantial too. About 2 years or so, and we have the numbers we can give you on paper, it leveled out. And so now, last year, I think Verizon gained about 30 and Comcast lost about 30 subscribers. We expect that to level out to a large degree, depending on marketing and how the companies do.
promotions.
But in terms of share of the market, then it's 50/50?
No, Verizon has maybe 55-45.
So Verizon has the 58
Or
and
55, call it. Verizon has the higher amount now. Yeah.
That might be different next year. It might swing the other way.
Well, that just surprises me, because I know when we did the Verizon license, we weren't sure what was going to
Right.
happen, and
They-
Comcast had a monopoly, and we were
Exactly. They
hopeful
were
that they would...
anticipating 25-30. I thought that might be a little low. They've done very well. And they do particularly well in communities that have a particular interest in the internet side as much as or more than the cable TV side. And you find that in a community that has a different background, you might find that Comcast has more. In most communities, Comcast has more. But in communities that have similar makeup of Sherborn, in terms of, let's say, educational level or something, you find that Verizon's done very well. And I think it's because the perception on the internet side, whether it's the reality, I don't know.
Could you talk briefly about this minimum density requirement, just
Yeah,
what
that's
that means?
critical. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Oh,
I also have their strand map that shows their town coverage. It's in that red book as well on the back. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, okay. Well, this, I think, is the toughest issue that the town has to face. That Sherborn and Dover both had licenses, and it was a matter of negotiation last time, that the cable company had to make cable available to every residence. And so every dwelling unit, that would be existing or going forward. Now, in recent years, cable companies have tried to push back on that, particularly what I call the little house on the prairie, because the one or two homes by themselves could have, in the modern world where it's tougher to build in a place that doesn't have challenges, whether it's ledge or water or something, can be very expensive to go to. And they want to argue that they're not a utility and that there's not a right to cable service, and there can be places where the cost is so prohibitive that it's not reasonable for them to have to bring it. Now, I sometimes argue in their draft license there'll be areas which I don't accept, but which says that they have to be treated like other utilities. Well, you really can't have it both ways. But that said, that's a tough issue because it's not a totally unreasonable argument. And now Sherborn is 100% built out. Everyone has cable available. So that they would like to change that. Now, in their draft license, they have as a proposal, and 30 dwelling units per mile as a minimum for any area that's served aerially, and 60 dwelling units per mile for any area that's served underground. Those are far, far too high for a suburban town, much less a town like Sherborn, which has homes that are greater distance apart.
Is the issue that they're going to try to withdraw cable from some parts of town? I mean, or not upgrade it, or what's?
Just that they wouldn't have to build it if you have some new homes that, let's say, if you have a subdivision that has some sort of, and you realize subdivisions here are not going to be, except if they're congregate type housing, where you, they're not going to be, they're still going to be dense, but maybe not as dense as other areas. But they don't want to have to build new places unless it meets some minimum standard. It's a very tough issue. It's a tough issue. And a lot of places where there's tremendous density, I've seen Comcast licenses where they now have fairly high density requirements. When I work with a town that has high density, my position with Comcast is, hey, you get the benefits of great density in terms of some of the cost. Along with that benefit comes the responsibility that if they have a few houses here and there, you need to get them done. That's just fair. So I don't like to see a town go backward in density. That said, by comparison, this was a large issue in Dover, which did the license about a year and a half ago, and it resolved in Dover at 10 homes, 10 dwelling units per mile, whether aerial or underground. Now, if you look at cable licenses generally, you don't see many 10 dwelling units. Comcast would prefer 20 or so, or a license might have no density requirement. So that's still an issue that's being finalized. I don't mind publicly stating that, at least in terms of what Doug's at, and I think the committee, that they're prepared to recommend to the board the 10 dwelling units per mile. Most of your housing that's to be built will get done with that. It doesn't mean the cable company still can't provide service. It just means they don't have to. And remember, we do have in Sherborn, I say we because I work with you and I associate with your need, gross revenue that's higher than you would find in some other communities. You can go to the North Shore of Boston, communities that that have gross revenue of $90, $95. So there's still would be an interest, and as Doug said, this is just the cable part of it. So that would be our recommendation to the board. I think for now, the board should not express an opinion. Let's see what we can negotiate with Comcast. That's our goal. We think that's fair. We think there's a good comparison with Dover here. You don't always compare yourself to another town, but here we think the towns from a cable perspective and from a land use perspective have a lot of similarities, and we would hope that the committee could present that to the board, and the board would give that serious consideration as a final result if and when we achieve that.
Well, I think I'm on the record from 10 years ago and from 2007 about the importance of providing access to every home in Sherborn. And I believe we got that in the current license, and I think it's also in the Verizon license.
That's correct.
And because of that, I think the community got built out. And Verizon had to put quite an investment into Sherborn. They had to put a lot of
I remember last time Town Line Road, which is entered from Millis, had no coverage, and we had that as a result of the last Comcast license.
So I'm while I don't want to take a position to follow your advice, I am
Guidance is
quite concerned about backtracking from what we have now, particularly where there are some developments that are on the table here in town. As the economy improves, there's houses are being sold and people are thinking of doing things, and there are some things going on. Just want to be sure that people in Sherborn have access to cable. It has sort of become nationwide not a utility in the utility sense, but something that people want to have.
We appreciate the feedback on that.
Yeah, yeah, I would hate to see us do worse than Dover, but I'm not taking a position. What about the indemnification issue? Is that something we need to be too concerned about at this stage?
The legal indemnification issues, I mean.
Well, you've got that up there as a
I'm sorry,
bullet
yeah.
point.
No, I think.
That's just working out some wording.
Yeah, and the wording that I have in our draft, I think, is fully protects the town. They're in their model draft, which I don't use as a basis for my draft. There are times where those protections have loopholes. The protection we will have will fully protect the town in indemnification and in insurance.
Yeah, that's great. And I really like the idea of this migration to HD capability. I think that's forward thinking.
Right.
But
We're not sure we can get them to commit to that.
But that's our position, and we think there's a great argument. Now, there may be one or two issues at the end of the day here that we still have a divide, and at that point, we'll speak to the board and maybe ask that Comcast come and meet with the board to finalize those issues. As I said, I think we're dealing with a fair person on the Comcast side, but tough negotiators. So I'm hopeful, but it may be at the end of the day we need a final meeting so that they can hear directly from the board how strongly they feel and why they have good reasons to feel strongly about a few limited issues.
Yep. As far as the public hearing, what should we expect, or what should we be providing to the folks that would choose to come to that public hearing?
Good point. I think what we can do beforehand is, firstly, a presentation by Doug about, like here today.
Yeah.
I think I'd expect that there may be folks who participate in PEG access programming who would want to be heard. There may be members of the public who have questions. Sometimes those questions are about issues that are outside of the scope of this board's authority. And I will provide a sort of a bullet point process memo that takes us through what needs to be done. But really, it's really what, if there anything concerns the board has, and to hear from the public. I expect.
Is this the ascertainment hearing?
Well, we call it, at this point, it's going to be a hearing. A hearing's required on the state regulation to sign a license. And so before we sign, we want to meet that requirement. And we also want to hear from the public if there's any issues that aren't available. Now, in terms of the draft license, we'll be providing the draft license to this board early next week. I think we'll probably, Doug will have it in the committee. So sometime early next week, the board will have our draft license from our side. If it's okay, I'll present that to Frank, subject to the fact that the board, may have some other questions or positions on it. And then Frank would mark that up and we would negotiate on that. Now, we've talked about the timing of the process. Because the meeting that we've had went well and the discussion went well, and discussion since, what I would expect would be, and we discussed this with Mr. Foss, who even suggested it, that at that meeting, we'd have the board vote what's called a preliminary denial, just to protect everyone's rights, saying because the license hasn't been finalized yet, that there'd be a preliminary assessment of preliminary denial of their license. Comcast representative actually suggested that. I do that at times, but suggested it in this case to protect the parties' rights. And there's an outside chance we might be done with the license on May 15th, in which case, if the board's had sufficient time to review it, and if the board's satisfied with it, the board could sign that night after the hearing. If it turns out there questions come up or the hearing that aren't addressed in the license, I don't expect that to be the case, then the board would just issue the preliminary denial, and then we would, at the next, when ready, the board would sign the license. So that's not untypical. I think the key is we're very close, just the final few issues
Sure.
we discussed, which are really important issues, but not many in number.
Terrific. Great.
No, as I mentioned before, from what I saw in the first chart, the big issues you've pretty much got there. The
Thank you.
5%, congratulations on that. That's a fabulous rate for,
That's right.
And then what you do with the money is discretionary,
Well,
in terms of what equipment you purchase, or
it goes,
how
we
you pay those fees.
entered into
through
an
this.
agreement with the corporation. We helped create a corporation that has jointly with Dover, and we have 4 seats on that.
That's right. 3 of us are here. We also serve on the Cable TV Advisory Committee.
So a little background on that would be
And so
helpful
the
in
money
advance.
goes,
you know.
we've assigned the money to them,
Mhm.
and so our 4 representatives plus the 4 from Dover?
Actually, 5. so
5
It's
from
about
Dover.
5 to 4 ratio representing the number of subscribers.
Oh, yes, and they're bigger,
Dover's bigger.
bigger town, yeah. So 5 and 4, and they decide on how the money is spent to provide services to both communities.
as the chair said, that they can present at the hearing, to Doug do a presentation, or somebody else from Dover Sherborn Community Television, to go over briefly what they do and what they do now and what some of their plans are going forward.
Yeah. So a little background in advance of that public hearing would be helpful in this,
Okay.
our relationship with the DSC TV. That'd be terrific.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
feel very well served in
Yeah,
terms of
absolutely.
the expertise and the
Oh, yeah, this is great. The
conscientiousness
committee's
on
efforts,
this, yeah.
Bill's looking out for our best interests, and you sure know your
In a very
stuff.
clear presentation for somebody
Yes.
who's, I'm not familiar with this stuff.
Thank you
so
very
it's good.
much. Just one final comment. Folks, where I live, I helped start the Access Corporation through my town work, and, folks who are new to a community or hadn't paid attention, and they see what your Access Corp does, they think that's been there for 40 years. They just think it's a natural part of life, but it only happened because of the work of the board, the work of the volunteers, the corporation, and it means a lot to our community, because it means a lot for the government to get its message out, so for people to
Yes.
understand what government does. And in a world where everyone thinks everyone does nothing, it's important to see how hard people work and what they do. And it's important, even though, it's mostly a residential community, it's important for the local economy. There are artisans, there are other folks, small businesses, who can or will use Access Television. And so, as I always say, when I go to Sonoma or Arizona for a conference, or Washington DC, and you go to the inn or the hotel room, and you turn on the TV, and they have some local programming, and in half an hour I feel I know more about that community than sometimes I know about my own. And that's what Access TV can do in an age where everything is kind of split apart. Give a sense of community, a sense of the local economy, and sometimes people don't realize how much it does do and how much that becomes a part of the fabric of the community. And your Access Corp has become that, and that's a credit to everybody.
That's very well said. That's great. Well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Miguel,
Elliot, do you have a question? Yes,
I have
sir.
a comment. The audio on Comcast leaves much to be desired. I'll go across the zapping through channels. The audio's good. I come to channel 22 and the audio's way down. I crank it up as far as I can, and yeah, okay, I can hear it. Sometimes it's so weak that I can't even hear it, so it's back to Access Hollywood. But at any rate, can you please do something to jack channel 22 audio up so I can go across the dial, I can come back, and if you're talking about something here that I don't really care about, I can go to a weather channel or something and then come back and not get blown off the couch when I have it all full tilt. So you have an audio problem on channel 22, and will you please do something to bring it up to the other channels?
Hopefully that fiber cable will,
Well, we can do something before that. And Elliot, it probably came about in the past few months.
No,
as we were-
this has
no?
been
It was pretty well
quite a
balanced every
while.
time I test. But I don't want to go too deep, but we had trade-offs between the Verizon signal not getting good color and the Comcast
Yeah.
being overmodulated. There's some infrastructure we need to change in this aging building, you know, pull of cable down to the basement and so on. But
Well, my wife uses the excuse, she can't hear me very well, so she changes the channel, stops watching. I think that's just an excuse, though.
but we can always make it better, so thanks for bringing it up.
Thanks again. Really
Good, thank
appreciate
you.
it.
We'll end that excuse. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks to your committee. Sherborn, Town of Volunteers. All right, well, so that brings us back to the Veterans Tax Work-Off Program. And I'm gonna, Paul and David, I know David wrote something great, so why don't you just walk us through, and Paul, you can help him through it all. How's that?
Want me to start it?
Well, maybe I should just remind everybody why we need a program, because I know there's some concern that this comes late. And I want to explain why late is better than not at all. This program is to benefit our veterans, and our veterans in this community and throughout the Commonwealth need help. As we all know, we've been fighting wars constantly. And in these days, we're able to save lives and bring back veterans where in prior wars we would have lost those veterans and they would not have come back. But those that come back often aren't the same as when they went into the service. The Department of Defense reports that 29% of the vets who come back have physical disabilities, and some of those disabilities are horrific. Loss of legs, loss of arms. In addition to the physical injuries, there's a large psychological impact on our veterans. Post-traumatic stress disorder and a lot of accompanying psychological burdens that are placed on them as a result of their service. The Department of Labor, United States Department of Labor, reports that unemployment for vets runs higher than the ordinary civilian workers. And vets, because they've lost time serving their country, are behind their contemporaries in the job market. But perhaps the most grim statistic of all is that there's a very high suicide rate for vets. It's been reported that 22 vets commit suicide a day. So every day, there's 22 who take their lives. So they need help. We need to do more. The President of the United States has called for more. Our governor has called for more. And there are more programs that are being designed to help them. The program that we have here was enacted by the General Court. It's a local acceptance statute, which means that it's up to every community to choose whether to do this. It's a program to encourage vets to be able to stay where they are, not lose their homes, by giving them an abatement on their taxes to the extent of $1,000. The $1,000 has to be earned by volunteering in the community. The statute authorizes the Board of Selectmen to set up a program, which means if the town meeting, which has to accept this, if town meeting accepts this, they would authorize this board to establish a program. And so the question would be, from voters who are considering this, is what does the Board of Selectmen have in mind? What kind of program would we be looking at? And at the advisory hearing, we were told that there was 173 vets in town. And a concern was expressed, well, if 173 vets all volunteered down at Town Hall, maybe to work in the Selectman's office, we couldn't fit them there, and it would run up a tab of $173,000. So we would have to have a program. The statute, in addition to authorizing us, the board, to have this program that would address issues like how many vets, what kind of financial impact, also provides two additional options which have to be voted by town meeting as a subsidiary part of the acceptance of the statute. One of those provisions allows a disabled vet to have a representative do the volunteer work. The concern was that many vets would not be able to take advantage of this program because of their disabilities. But this, if town meeting authorizes that, and if this board wants it as part of the program, we could have veterans designate someone to perform the community service. We can also choose under the statute the nature of the limitation. We can have a $1,000 limitation, or we can have 125 hours. The importance of the difference is that currently the program requires minimum wage, which is $8 an hour. 8 times 125 is 1,000 hours.
$1,000, yep.
It's $1,000. But those of us at the state level who are paying attention to this are determined to raise the minimum wage here in Massachusetts. And so both the leadership of the House and the Senate and the governor have pledged to raise that $8 to some higher number. And those numbers range between $10 and $11 an hour, which means that if we decided on the 125, we could go up to $1,250 per vet, or if the minimum wage goes to 11, it would be 11 times, this is getting hard to math. I'll probably, you're the math guy. So
More.
So, and in other communities that I've talked to about this, the question has come up, well, if a vet is also a senior, should that vet be able to take advantage of both programs? And some communities have decided yes, and some communities have decided that the program that the Board of Selectmen should put together should limit the vet to the vet program and the senior to the senior program. That's a choice that we have to make. The program, I think, fits this community well because it works well with other initiatives that I've worked on in the past. We have the senior tax program that I helped bring to this community and has been, I think, quite successful. And many of the vets are seniors, and some of those vets have in fact taken advantage of the senior program. And so there's some familiarity out there with that program. It also fits well with the establishment of the Veterans Day observations that we had put into place several years ago, where we give recognition to our vets. We spend a lot of energy. It took quite a few years to get that program going. I hope it's not going to take many years to get this particular program going. It also fits well with another thing that I've worked on, which is the Memorial Day program, which focuses on the remembrance of those who are not with us. This program that I'm pushing here remembers those who did come back. It tries to provide them with a place so that they can stay in this community. There also was a suggestion that we should consider here at the advisory hearing, that there be a means test, and that's been discussed in other communities and on the state level. And the decision was to not include that as a requirement of the program, but because the statute authorizes us to the Board of Selectmen to set up the program, we could have a means test. There are lots of pros and lots of cons for a means test, but for a community like Sherborn, where there's a very high property value base and a very high per capita income statistic, we have had the problem that the means tests in other contexts don't work for Sherborn. If a vet inherits his parents' property, is living in town, he may very well have an asset, or he or she may very well have an asset that's worth $500,000 or more. Because of the differences in property values around the state and the difference as to where income goes, the state decided not to require a means test here. There is a policy argument that there should be uniformity across the state for these programs, that a vet who lives in Sherborn should be able to have the same opportunities and same tests and same standards as a vet who lives in Medfield or Natick. That should be basically the same program statewide. I did have a chat with our town administrator and asked him to look into this, and he has looked into this, and he has prepared a report. And what I hope that we could do here tonight is to reach some consensus on what a program might look like. And if we can achieve such a consensus, I would be willing to try to bring this up at town meeting and see if the voters would be willing to adopt it this year rather than waiting a year.
I think you'd only have 2 minutes to do it at town meeting, though.
That's right. So, Paul, my thoughts on this, just so I,
Well, can I have
you
David
get
present the,
oh, sure. Go for
his
it.
thoughts?
My thoughts are just, it's very simple, whether you want to do an expansion of like the existing senior program with a different set of eligibility requirements for veterans?
Yep.
Or do you want to adopt the canned, and I don't mean canned negatively,
But the statewide
the
version.
statutory program?
Yeah.
I myself, I like having institutional security of adopting something that's already in statute.
Yeah.
Did you get answers to your questions? I noticed there's an April 2nd email in here, and Paul, I was listening, but I was also reading along here, so forgive me, I hadn't seen this yet. So there were questions that somebody raised, I don't know who, about unemployment insurance. It says Chris Brown will respond to this. Did you ever get an answer to that? Diane says she does have an answer. We just don't have it in the package, I guess.
But I think we
I think
saw
we
that
did, but it
we're
was
subject to
minimal.
it, right? And it would be nominal, because we're not talking big amounts.
Right. If
Because
you
we're
were
not-
if you were limiting to
We're
5
talking small
people,
amounts, so,
with 5, it'd be $5,000 would be your exposure for the year.
No, I'm talking about the unemployment insurance.
Right, right. I mean, that's the only exposure you would have, would be, they could only make a claim on what they had earned on that year. Or you mean,
Well, I don't know if that's how unemployment insurance works or not. I don't know if it works on an annualized basis.
well, it's a percentage of where, I mean, if the person has 3 different employers, that would be broken up, and we would be billed the portion that we're responsible for, but we wouldn't be paying the entire benefits of somebody who was
Understood.
receiving unemployment. No.
it could
I just-
modestly impact
Yeah,
our
I
rating
just
or
want
something.
to understand
I think
whether
that's
there are
fair.
other fiscal implications we should be thinking of.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the rationale for doing this. I mean, I think it's a little bit, I don't want to say canned either, but the legislature created this program, but doesn't do anything for veterans who are renters. It doesn't do anything for veterans who live with parents who own homes. It really doesn't do anything probably for the most hard-up veterans, because they're not going to own a home in Sherborn. So this is something that's going to be a thank you to veterans in our town who have been, in many cases, successful enough to purchase a home in Sherborn and have the privilege of paying taxes to Sherborn, and we'll tell them they can pay a little bit less. And I mean, if that's the will of the public, that's fine, but let's not kid ourselves that this is doing something for a lot of recent veterans, because I don't think it is. It doesn't mean it's a bad policy, but, maybe there are other things we could do as a town for those veterans. I don't know.
Well, I guess my take of this is, this was a good package, David. It had a lot of good information in it. For me, even though they're getting a break on they're working for a break. They're
Yeah,
working for $1,000.
Understood.
So we're getting cheap labor, whether it's minimum wage or whatever it is. So my take is, I'm, based on all of those variety of variables that Paul talked about, I think I'm fine with the stand-in person being, I support trying to do this. Whether we can do it, it can get bogged down, so whatever we do needs to be very simple, clear, and concise at town meeting. But, so, from the half dozen items that you can choose as a board, I support having a stand-in person if someone's disabled. I like the idea of 125 hours, whether we're paying them, we're getting somebody to work 125 hours for 8, 10, or 11 bucks an hour, no benefits, no lifetime benefits, no vacation, none of that stuff. That's going to be a bargain. I'm okay if there's a duplication and they're also getting senior credits. I think the limitation of who gets it, there's an issue of whether, I guess maybe a lottery, but you limit it to 5 or 10. I think that even 10 is a good amount from my perspective versus the 5. I don't really think the means test is important to me. And I like the idea of doing the state's version as opposed to a Sherborn version that we could somehow muck up, And I like the ability of a person to go from community to community, as you stated here, David. So that's where I'm at. If you are ready to stand up in the 2 minutes or the 5 minutes or whatever it is that's allowed to make the case on this, Paul, I'll be behind you on it.
David, I like the provisions you have here. I would suggest a limit of one per household. But other than that, I kind of with Peter in terms of the other issues. I think it's very important to include the disability issue, assuming, we're going to have, assuming we have people who qualify for this, we ought to be particularly attuned to the ones who are disabled, the veterans who are disabled, who might want to take advantage of this or sick.
Or maybe a preference.
Yeah, maybe a preference. Well, I don't know if we want a preference for spouses working, maybe that doesn't make sense, but.
You mentioned 5 or 10, and obviously I'd like more than less, but in order to get this passed, it might be easier to say to folks for year 1, let's try it at 5 and see how it goes. Once the statute's adopted, it authorizes the Board of Selectmen to establish a program, so.
Yep. So we would commit to no more than 5
The selectmen could amend
first
the
year.
program after a year or reevaluate it after a year.
And if there's 10 people who apply and we have only 5, then in year 2, we could go to 10.
I guess the way I look at 5 is like, then it's a rounding error, it's.
It's an accountant.
It's insignificant, it's, whether it's 5 or 10, it's 10 people doing, it's 11,250 hours worth of work at minimum wage, no benefits, that the town would benefit by while providing this benefit to the veterans.
It's not
if
11,000
they
hours,
choose.
it's $11,000 and it's.
Well, times 10 people.
11,000
Times 10 people.
$11,000, 1,100.
1,100 hours, yes. So I'm not so good in that.
That raises another question too, though. What we're saying effectively is we're going to spend the town's money on more staff at town hall. They're temporary staff, they don't get benefits.
Or
they don't-
elsewhere.
They don't get vacation, or elsewhere. So what do you have in mind, David, as what folks would do under this program? Understanding that the senior program, there are certain things that folks are doing, so you're not necessarily going to be able to or want to duplicate what they're doing. So what's,
Right. I think the only thing we've used the seniors for is basic clerical coming in, and they also, a lot of them help the Council on Aging. And I'm not sure exactly what their duties are with coming into the Council on Aging. But, I haven't laid out exactly what I would be assigning them, but we were planning on having it go through the veterans agent, see what their strength is and what they're capable of doing, and then coming up with something. But
You have a
they're-
good form that you've created, I think that.
You always need a good form.
nothing like a good form.
But no, I haven't,
Yeah, no, I was,
so
I'm fine, 5 or 10, Paul, whatever you think is most
Well,
likely
I'd go
to
for the 10.
succeed.
I'd go for the 10.
I don't,
I think Paul's instinct of
5 is,
it might be more politically tenable on 5 is probably right, but I don't care. No, I mean, I'm indifferent. If you think 10's the way to go, then
think,
fine.
Well, it's just that there was pushback and from different,
well, I think what we heard was there
Sources.
weren't even necessarily any veterans who would necessarily take advantage of the program. I don't think we knew, right? The info from the veterans agent was that he wasn't sure anybody was.
early on, there
Take
wasn't
care
a
of it.
big demand, and we were thinking that it would be the younger veterans coming back from existing battles, so I don't,
And that's my question is, how many of them are paying taxes?
probably not a lot of them are property owners
I mean,
in
that's a-
Sherborn.
but that's why, if no one takes advantage of the program, it costs the community nothing.
Yeah, it's not a downside.
There's no downside. And to anybody, to a vet who's looking to live in Sherborn, this wouldn't be the program that would bring him here. The schools would and things like that. But it's an additional offset when they're looking at a house and the school costs and the taxes here. The fact that they might be able to get this break might make it easier for them. And then there's this whole class of people who inherit their parents' property. Properties that were bought 20, 30, 50 years ago. And now suddenly they own this property, and the taxes now sometimes are higher than what the parents paid for the property when they bought it. Are they going to have to move out of town? So part of it helps retain some of these young people in the parental home.
Yeah, in theory, any of that could happen. I mean, let's just see how it goes.
So if you're more comfortable with 5.
I'm really
You're
indifferent
not-
to
yeah.
5. My only comment was I thought Paul's initial reaction that it might be easier to convince people who are on the fence to start small and grow it, but maybe 10 is starting small, I don't know. I don't think there's a right answer. I want to say I have more comfort with the idea, given that David has looked into all these issues. I
Yes.
think it was very important
Yeah, I
that he look
understand.
into the issues. I don't think we can, and I don't think it's, whatever it is, ready, shoot, aim, or something like that. I mean, we need to know what we're getting into, and maybe Paul had a higher level of comfort because of all his involvement with other communities.
So if we were to vote on this again, you might be more inclined to
No,
vote in
I would
favor.
support what David has come up with here. I'm going to support the
Well,
recommendation.
can I make a motion
Yes, you,
that if the statute be...
we've never seen him move so fast.
If the statute is adopted at town meeting, the program envisioned by the Board of Selectmen, so I can represent this as
Yes.
part of the presentation, the program envisioned by the Board of Selectmen would be to use the state, what you call the CAN program, 1 per household, no means test, 5 in year 1, no permitted duplication, that is, they can use the senior program and they can use the vet program separately.
Mhm.
The 125 hours and the ability to have a representative perform the services if they cannot.
And did you say no means test required?
No means
No
test.
means test, you said.
Yeah.
So
I second
that's my
that.
motion.
I second that motion. Any other
Do
discussion?
we need to specifically adopt the provisions about having somebody serve or any of those other provisions that are part of this? I'm recalling in the statute there
Motion
were...
at town meeting has to include,
Well, that's what I'm wondering. What does it have to include?
it has to adopt the statute, chapter 59, section 5N, and opt for the 125 hours and the
So the motion
ability to,
would need to change, right?
the motion is no action right now.
Well, then the language of the warrant article would need to change. Does it say including sub 1 and 2?
It says, the warrant article says to accept the statute or take any other action related thereto.
So wouldn't we want it specifically to say accept the statute, including
Yeah, the motion.
sub clauses
Yes.
1 and 2? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
But that's, you're presumably going to have to make that motion.
Yes, well, first I have to defeat advisory's motion of taking no action on this article. And, the issue for advisory was it came very late in the
Yes.
process. And yes, it would be nice to have it come earlier, but why should veterans have to pay for the inefficiency in bringing this thing forward? That, at the end of the day, this program is for them. It's not for us who brought it forward. Could have done it better, could have been more efficient, could have better followed the guidelines that we set up. At the end of the day, it's a good program to help people. So why hold it up for a year?
Any other discussion?
I mean, since you asked the question, I'm going to say the same thing I said before, which is I'm against how this got here, because I think it did violate our process. The Selectmen has voted to support this article. David's put forward a program. I'm in favor of the program David put forward.
Well, we haven't voted yet.
So we haven't voted. So any other
I'm
discussion?
just discussing.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Excellent, well done.
you. Okay.
Great, this help put it over the goal line here,
Yeah.
right? Okay, good job, Paul. So you'll be
Thank you, Mike.
with bells on at town meeting for this one, huh? Excellent. Okay, just back to, now moving back to selectmen's reports, we've covered those two items. One item I kept getting reminded on was school graduation, just wanted to be sure, I'm happy to be the guy on that. But I don't want to forego any rights next year to flip a coin if
That's the
I...
thing, I think we have to do a tag team next year, Peter, with both of our
Okay.
kids graduating.
Yeah,
so.
that would be, that'd be kind of
Yeah.
cool, wouldn't it?
Abbott and
All right.
Costello, or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that?
Yeah, Mutt and Jeff, sure, absolutely. All right, but unless somebody has a burning urge this time, which I don't, but I'm happy to do it.
Well, I was going to say, if nobody else wanted to do it, I would do it, because I've done it so many times, I've got it all prepared.
You don't want to give the same speech again, Paul. No, I
But-
mean, everybody's had older brothers or sisters, they've heard it. You got to come up with something new.
So it's really your
So I'm
turn.
happy to do it.
It's fun.
Fine, okay, so
As
we can let Jeannie
as long as we
know
can do the
that.
tag team next year.
Yeah, or we flip a coin, I mean, either way. Yeah, no, yeah, tag team would be great.
I think we should do a tag
That'd be
team.
fun, that'd be fun, embarrass our daughters.
You get embarrassed when you get embarrassed, both of them.
Yeah, that'd be great. Any other town administrator reports, David? I'll just say I was glad to see this unsolicited March 31st report from the town accountant. I do have 6 questions. I'll put those in an email rather than take
Okay.
any more time tonight.
Okay.
But one thing I did want to touch on, the status of, just let these guys know, because they may not know about the Jameson Fields. What's going on there? Because I don't,
There was
Really?
about 7 months ago, last fall, there was an issue with drainage.
yep.
At first report, it was part of the school septic system. After further investigation, it's an old drainage pipe, not related to the septic system. So,
So that
It
takes the
was-
burden, there was a slight issue last 7 months ago of who owned the issue, if it was a septic or
Right,
the otherwise.
right.
And we've drawn a line in the sand that
it's clearly on
literally and
our side.
figuratively, that the septic belongs to Pine Hill, but the fields belong to the town.
Right,
In
right.
terms of that, yes.
So underneath that field, there's some sort of old
Piping
pipe
or
that's been
something.
collapsing somewhere. Really don't know where it starts or where it ends, but it's creating a hole. So they filled it in last fall, and recently water's gotten in there and washed it all out again. So it's been roped off. We got an estimate to remediate the whole pipe, put in a drainage so that water won't build up in there, and then fill the whole thing back in. So what Ed's been doing right now is working with the rec department on the timing of doing the project, so that it
We
would
got
be...
spring season commencing here with
Right, so
sports.
Melissa Bowman and I talked that we might be able to put up an outfield fence, temporary outfield fence that's much shorter
Oh,
outfield.
some more home runs.
Yeah, exactly. So that the construction doesn't interfere with the ball fields when they can still play.
And do we
Finally
have
have
to?
water in town center now, that's good.
Yeah, that's good. Do we have to?
And we didn't even-
Does Concom have to be involved in any of this, I wonder?
Not that I know of, no. We'll
'Cause it's
double
a
check with them.
drainage. Yeah.
Better check with them.
Yeah, we can,
I don't think there's any wetlands right on the field.
Yeah,
so
no,
we're
it's
close
just
enough by, but
drainage
yeah.
of water
Got rid of
stuff.
pond or something.
Yeah, but I don't know, but that's good, so we're on it, and
So that-
we're working with rec and all of that.
and the cost is $14,200 was the quote.
To do the full fix? Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
And so that's a fix that
Permanent
is a
fix.
permanent fix, and it's going to improve the drainage down there.
Right, should water end up in there, they will drain out.
And where's it drain
New
to?
drain.
Elliot's backyard. Just kidding, Elliot, I'm just kidding, but you have your hand raised, and I know,
Yeah, I'm curious about this pipe.
yes.
Having lived within 500 feet of this mystery pipe for 80 years, I'm curious as to just where it is.Maybe it comes into my backyard, I don't
Well,
know.
we won't know until we get somebody to
To
actually start.
Excavate and
Yeah.
rebuild and clear.
Because some of
There's-
it might be,
I can't think of any pipe over there that I know of that's not part of the school septic system.
Yeah.
No, it's been determined it's not part of the school septic system. It's a drain, something from maybe over near the cemetery road in that direction.
Well, there is of course, there's the skating pond there by the tennis court, and there's an underground pipe that comes under Cemetery Road and then immediately turns, goes parallel with the road, under Eaton Apothecary, under the railroad and out into the meadow beyond.
It's not a,
But I can't imagine any pipe, of course, unless it has something to do with the firehouse septic system.
I don't know the estimated age on it, but it's not anything that's any part of our current drainage system. It's an old
And there's no
old system.
drawings and so forth. Yeah, no, we all are, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. What else, anything else to give us an update on at this stage?
Water
Megan?
department or water meeting, David? Do you want to talk about that at this point, or?
We did meet,
And you're part of this, right?
Yeah.
I'm part of this as long as it doesn't meet at 4 in the afternoon, yeah.
it was meeting at, we met 4:30 Monday, and then we had a list of things I meant to email out on what we were working on, but it was mostly Roger Demler and Eric Johnson from the planning board that had the most gathered information that they were going to be bringing back to the next
This is
meeting.
water and sewer issues of the downtown
I think this is
district.
more water. I mean,
More water.
if you remember when Roger came in, one of the suggestions I made was that we have a lot of information on this topic, and maybe it's time to stop studying it in various different directions and actually can pull that information together and come up with a plan to actually do something.
Yeah, yeah.
And so hopefully that's what this committee will accomplish. I don't know if others are inclined the same way, but it seems to me that we should be a lot closer to being able to put a real proposal in front of the town, and we don't have to be as much at the investigatory stage from what I can tell, and I don't know if David has the same impression.
The meeting was very positive, and we're meeting again on the
And
28th
this
at
is
5.
an ad hoc task
So
force?
I think it
group,
ended
or
up
what
being
are we-
a task force called by the water commissioners, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
good. Oh,
So it's, they have a lot of information that they have pulled together in the past that they think should be updated, and then we can utilize. But the
And so-
goal was stated to bring something to next year's annual town
That'd
meeting.
be great.
And the lead on this is would be the water commissioners,
I
basically?
think Roger and I kind of have traded the
Okay.
emails, and David is sort of fulfilling his role as the
Yes.
It was,
staff.
this meeting was
This is
pretty much run
preliminary.
by Roger with,
Yeah.
he brought
That's terrific.
everything to the table.
Great.
So it's positive, and looks like it's off the ground.
Great. That's terrific. All right, any other thoughts while you're at it, David? No?
No.
Okay, annual town meeting. I don't have much to say, except one question that's come forward from a few people already, or I won't put it in the column of complaints, but more suggestive question, if you will, of whether Article 32 should be moved up in the order depending on, and that ultimately, I guess it's what the moderator will allow at town meeting. But the recommendation of a number of people is not leaving that item until last if it's done, if town meeting is done on one night.
There was,
I understand that.
there was a meeting that we had with the moderator where it was discussed, should it be scheduled for a second night? What
As a standalone,
Right.
if everything else is covered?
Right now, the plan is to go through one by one, and if it's not taken up around the 10 o'clock area, then we'd call the night and move it to a second night. So I think she's willing to go late, but I don't think she was planning on taking that article
Out
up
of
after
order.
10 PM.
What is this article, basically?
It's the Pulte project.
Oh, okay.
Or the
Well, if somebody
rezoning.
makes a motion to take it out of order,
That's the question.
and it's approved, I think they have to take it out of order.
So it's not something we're going, the selectmen manage and control anyway, so, okay.
If we want a good turnout at town meeting, it might be better to keep a little mystery around when that article
Yeah.
is called.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well, that's all part of it, it's the main draw.
the downside of, my experience has been when somebody takes something from an end of a warrant and moves it up, when people are expecting it at the end, they miss it when it was
Right.
voted early, and then they bring it up for reconsideration, and the people who brought it up originally have now left the meeting, and it can be
And then coming
problematic.
back the second night,
Yeah.
Okay,
this happened with the Sherborn Inn.
all right. And the proponents on various capital items and so forth are all teed up, and their presentations are
Yeah.
being tweaked a little bit.
The last remaining one we want to get to you is the fire department HVAC that they've been working on, just trying to clean it up so it's a lot clearer with a lot
Yeah.
less information.
Yeah, that's good. Good. I have no other thoughts for town meeting other than to show up in a suit. I was going to draft something up, which I haven't done because I'm a last-minute Louie, but I probably will do it in the next week.
Well, it's traditional that we have a selectmen's meeting about
It's-
half an hour to an hour before the start of town meeting, so we should notice that, and at that point, we.
We already booked for 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So do we want to be at 6? It starts at 7. Do we want to be an hour early is the question.
I think so,
You
because they're
comfortable with
probably, yeah, I mean, if we
Yeah,
end and
that's
walk
fine.
around the high school,
Yeah.
it's not bad either, but
Right.
there may be things we can get done, even non-town meeting related things.
So we can have a couple of
warrants
agenda items and so
And whatever
forth.
else.
Yeah.
In fact, do we have a warrant today?
Yes, we do. We're closing in on getting to that point. All right. Any other things on town meeting then? No? Okay. So selectmen's minutes, I would move to approve the minutes of February 6th, February 24th, and February 28th.
Second.
2014. Any discussion? All in favor? All right. I would move to approve the warrant that's been reviewed and approved by David in the amount, it's warrant number 36. I've looked at it briefly. It's $626,892.74. So I've made that motion.
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
No, as long as you and David have reviewed them.
All in favor? Great. And there's a question of a meeting next week, which is school vacation week. David, you're away. You want to sign that one?
Yeah.
And it's not a warrant night anyway, so I'm happy to take a 2-week hiatus, particularly given we're meeting an hour before town meeting. Unless somebody wants to, you guys are around,
I
you want to
think
meet?
that the 2-week hiatus we just took proves that the town can live without us, so that's
That's right.
good.
Okay, so no meeting next week. All right?
We don't want the voters to think that they can do without the Board of Selectmen.
No, hopefully we can get to that point.
It would be interesting.
But for years, we met every two weeks, and only in the last year or two, we've been meeting.
But they can get the reruns on the cable and if they miss us.
So are you going to, on the 28th, are you going to decide at that point whether you want to post something on the 1st or?
No,
Maybe we
we
should
only-
posted
Contingently post for the first.
We should post for the 1st, okay.
So we're posted for both nights,
Okay.
anyway. Yeah.
Or we're posted at the high school for the first. So in other words, if it
Right,
doesn't
right.
go to a second night, we would have our meeting at the high school?
No.
You probably wouldn't have the meeting that week.
You won't know it in time. You won't know in time.
And that's a
You won't know-
warrant.
You won't know 48 hours ahead whether it's going to be a town meeting on the
Right.
first.
Or we just
Or
try
post
to
it for
put
both
this.
places.
You make it another night.
You should schedule a selectmen's meeting for both nights.
There is one
No, we're talking about the
scheduled.
first for both places, you said?
See, so in other words, if there isn't a second night of town meeting, but we're still posted for the first, right now you're posting us for a meeting at the Linquist Commons.
Yeah, you can change the location by posting a sign at the,
Sign on the door that the locations will change?
yes.
Oh, that works for me.
Actually,
Maybe what you
can.
should do is post it as, if town meeting continues to a second night, it'll be held at the high school. Otherwise, it'll be held at town hall.
Okay.
Simple enough.
Okay.
All right,
That, Paul, that works, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
I'm happy with that.
good. All right.
And then the following week, May 8th,
We are not around, so we're not meeting, and that's a non.
we won't meet that night. Okay. And it's an off warrant week.
That's right.
I mean, we could meet another night that week, and I could be there, or you could meet without me. I just can't.
But it's
make
an
it that
off
evening.
warrant week, so
Okay,
it's
fine.
Well, the
consistent.
28th, the 1st, and then the 15th would be
Okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Well, this says the Comcast license is on for the 8th.
No, that's
but-
been moved to
It
the
was changed to
15th.
15th.
Been moved to the 15th.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So now, I would move that the Board of Selectmen enter into.
Well, wait, did you do selectmen reports?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we were doing with the water. department and.
And we did the deed of gift there for the Historic Commission. We did the representation letter, unless you have something else.
Well, I
to
just
add.
wanted to add that the thing I sent you in by email, I had occasion to attend the local government advisory committee meeting, which I'm a member of, and we came up with this idea of the state giving more money to the 351 cities and towns. We presented the proposal, we complained about all the potholes on the roads and all the cracks and whatnot, and they took it under advisement, and within 24 hours, the governor agreed to release $30 million, which I hadn't ever seen him work quite that fast, which means an additional $38,000 will be coming Sherborn's way
For Bullet Street.
for anywhere in the town.
We had a complaint tonight about Bullard Street before you came in, Paul.
Potholes on.
Potholes on Bullard
You
Street.
did?
Yes.
Seriously?
Yeah. It was noted that you don't need to drive down Bullard Street to get where you're going.
Oh, I go to Millis, Sue, I drive down there. But there was one other thing I wanted to mention about that money.
Well, is the governor going to free up the rest of the road money?
He's on this tear that more money needs to be raised by taxes, so we've been floating these different ideas, but the legislature doesn't want to do it because it's an election year. So we're in a catch-22 on that, but the long-term solution is to increase the gas tax by another penny, or maybe 2 pennies. The governor wants to raise income taxes. He feels not enough money is there for transportation, so he doesn't want to release this money and things like the Pine Hill Road money and other things. He's kind of frozen in place. And the legislature doesn't want to be charging around raising taxes when November there's an election. So it's, whatever's going to happen is going to happen after November 8th.
So the legislature has no way to get that money they've appropriated out of the administration to the municipalities they appropriated it for?
That's right. It's been appropriated, and the governor signed it. He didn't veto it. It's there. And because the authorization is there, it can be used by the next governor. It can be used next year or the year after. It's just accumulating. So at some point,
So it has to run through the governor's control to be released to municipalities?
yeah, he has to actually go out and borrow the money. It's funded by borrowed funds.
So we could do that occasionally if we wanted to dig our heels in on something when it comes to borrowing money.
Just,
It's ultimately our decision.
yeah.
Oh, the thing I wanted to mention about, now I remember, the 38,000. Originally, the 351 were arguing, and I got not quite prevailed. They wanted the money split using the local aid formula. And under the local aid formula, for every 25 million, Sherborn gets 5,000. The Chapter 90 formula, for every 25 million, we get 30,000, 6 times more for every 25 million. The difference is a complicated formula for local aid and so on. So we had this big debate, and I guess because the right guy was there at the right time, we were able to get that done using the Chapter 90 formula and not the local aid
So
formula.
it's $6,000 we would have gotten otherwise, and
Yes.
instead we get 38.
Yes, yeah, just by a
Beautiful.
few words at the right time. It was absolutely amazing. It's like sailing a ship, and you just steered right around that rock or whatever it was. Just was thrilling. Those pieces just fell into place. Bingo. We got an agreement on the 351, with the 351 to go with the higher formula, which means less for the big cities,
Yeah,
because it's based on road mileage.
yeah.
And then the governor said yes.
So David, just give a little overview of how we're spending that 38, understanding that our potholes are being addressed anyway.
Right. The
Or will be
potholes,
addressed no matter what,
right.
anyway.
What it allows us to do is use some of that money to do a little bit more elaborate fixes on potholes. where instead of just plugging the pothole, you can have, there's some equipment that come in and scrapes the whole area out, and then it's graded better and filled, and so it's a more permanent fix. I know that Ed has a number of places where that's going to happen, that he wasn't planning on doing that before. There are also some areas with damaged guardrails that we've been kicking down the road that have been hazards. They're known hazards. We've received complaints about them, and they just keep getting moved. So we check to see if it could be used for that, and it can. So we'll be using some of the money for that.
And was there some painting of lines earlier on, too?
Yeah, line painting was also, we normally have that in the
July or
budget.
something.
So as of July 1st, then we schedule it, and then it's usually done mid-July, late July. I think last year it was early August. People really like to see that in the spring, but it becomes a budgeting issue. So what we can do with this money is order the line striping to be done in the current year. So that frees up the money as of July 1st that we can
We get more months of benefit
do
of
it.
that paint on the road.
Right, we can do it next spring
Yeah.
as well and move, shift to
So
that.
we can get it to a spring schedule
Yeah.
where it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the only holdup is all the streets need to be swept before you can do the line striping.
Why
So-
can't that be done? I mean, all the towns I'm driving through have had the streets swept.
It's actually, Ed has offered overtime several weekends in a row and had no takers on overtime. So
This can't be done during regular time? I mean, I see the other towns doing it during the daytime.
Actually, we're doing it. I got stuck
Yeah.
behind a street sweeper all the way from Natick all the way down to my place in
Yeah.
the southern part of town.
So some of the
Going
roads
2 miles an hour.
So they're cleaning the way to your house, Paul. What else?
So I had, I contacted the union attorney and said, we need an answer by X date because now we're under a deadline, the money needs to be used, and we want to get this done. That we were going to go to outside contractors, bring them in and get it done, or bring in part-time seasonal help on the weekends to run the equipment and get it done. So, now the union has
So we don't
agreed.
have, I'm still having trouble getting my head around, I probably just have to talk to Ed. We have so much stuff to do during the daytime, other than street sweeping, that we can't devote a day or two or several hours on a series of days to getting the town's street sweeping done.
We can bring Ed in so he can give you more
Well, I
specifics,
could talk
but
to
they've
Ed.
been
We don't need
doing,
to put him on the spot or anything, but.
they're filling potholes, they're getting other stuff cleaned up, some of the stuff's handwork.
They're prepping
I mean, you'd
fields
think
and-
they're down, 2 positions right now?
Yeah, maybe that's.
So, they're coming off a tough winter, and they weren't ambitious about taking the overtime on the weekend.
Yeah, and I don't know that there's not overtime in these surrounding towns, but Dover streets are pretty
Yeah.
clean, Wellesley streets are pretty clean. It's a shame we can't get those streets cleaned up earlier in the year.
It's something that we should talk about, because even after they've been swept, it's not like, there's no curbing, so it's like the dirt just continues to come off.
Fall back on the road.
Yeah. So,
Particularly
it's something
with
to
these
talk
rains.
about. Yeah, right.
Rains dry, just
So,
sweeps it back into the
I think
street.
it's particularly unsafe for bicycles and,
yeah,
even for cars sometimes.
yeah. And I know there's been a number of drainage repairs they've done, some culvert repairs, or clearing. A couple of shoulder complaints had come in where the shoulders were falling apart. So they've been doing what they can, and now they've agreed to come in at 3 a.m. to start earlier in the day to get the cleaning done before the traffic starts to pick up. And hopefully we'll see some results from that.
All right. Anything else under Selectmen's reports? And I move that the Board of Selectmen enter into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to discuss strategy with respect to non-union contract negotiations, and I so declare that having this discussion in open session may have a detrimental effect on the town's negotiating position with respect to the contract with the police lieutenant contract.
Yeah.
I need a second and a roll
Second.
call. Okay, and roll call, motion is second by Mr. Durensis, having a second, I'll now have roll call vote. Mr. Durensis?
Aye.
Mr. Jimo?
Aye.
Mr. Crusoe, aye. Having passed by a vote of 3-0. The open session is now closed, and we are off to executive session. All right, thanks, everybody.